Hi, I'm Mindy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing one of my favorite videos to make, and that is my top reads of 2020. This is going to be a top 12, my top 6 horror books of the year, and my top 6 in all the other genres. I'm going to talk about my top 6 horror books first. So if you're not interested in horror and want to see what other books I like, there will be a timestamp down below where you can go to the other section of my top reads. But I want to say that these are in no particular order. I had enough trouble just getting it down to 6 in each list. And I read very few new releases every year. I did read a few. I think there's maybe one on any of these 12 books. But most of these books are older, and I just happened to read them this year. I have a lot of books to read on my shelves from years past, buying uncontrollably, just something I've started to get a handle on. But to get through them all, I'm going to have to read some older books, which doesn't bother me. I really like them no matter how old they are. So let's get into my favorite books. First, for the horror books. The first book in my favorites is Revenge by Yoko Ogawa. This is a collection of short stories that are mostly everyday situations, only made quite creepy. And this collection was brilliantly written, and I loved how all of the stories were connected in some way. You'd be reading along and then you'd notice something from the story before it. However, the stories were very different, even though they had ties holding them all together. And I just thought this collection was brilliant. And if you haven't read it, I certainly suggest that you do. Check it out. The next book that I loved is Dear Laura by Gemma Moore. This is a very dark story about a young girl whose best friend is kidnapped right in front of her eyes, and then the kidnapper starts sending her letters in the mail, like a very creepy pen pal, with little clues about her friend and asking for increasingly disturbing things, gifts from her, in order to get more clues. These letters continue all the way through till she's an adult, and it is so incredibly creepy. But this novella was one that I could not stop reading. I had to know what was going to happen, and I didn't want anything to happen to Laura. The next book that I loved was Beneath by Christy DeMeester, which is a novel of cult horror about a woman who is assigned to investigate this snake handling cult. She does not want to go do this assignment because she has a traumatic past with something that happened with a church leader. But she goes, and the dark places that this novel goes is really amazing. There is a very supernatural element with some really strange creatures and happenings that come about. The next book that I loved in 2020 is Creature by Hunter Shea. This is a creature novel that is a step above any others that I have read in a long time. This story follows a couple where the wife has a couple autoimmune diseases, including lupus, that affect her very badly physically and health-wise. And this couple goes on vacation. They rent a cabin in the woods to kind of get away from the stresses of life. And it's something they've wanted to do for a very long time. And it starts off really well on this vacation, but then they realize there is something in the woods stalking them, a creature. I really love this story, and it's definitely up there on my top read. Next, I really loved Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This story follows a woman as she goes to visit her cousin in this old mansion in disrepair after she gets some troubling letters about the mansion and her husband and the family, that things are not so great there. So she goes to visit and see what is wrong, and many dark secrets are uncovered about this family. They're a very unlikable group of characters, and they have some troubling secrets. I loved the atmosphere of this book. I loved the wild, horrifying ending. I just loved everything about reading this book. And the last book on my favorite horror books of 2020 is one that I just finished in December, and that is Beneath Ash and Bone by D. Alexander Ward. This is a historical mystery horror novel taking place in pre-Civil War times on the outskirts of a small town in the South on an estate. The small town sheriff goes to investigate the case of a missing boy who happens to be a freed slave from this estate. All of the slaves on this estate have been freed but are still living and working there. The sheriff meets everyone who is living at this mansion. It was a really great mystery with some surprisingly very creepy supernatural elements. Some surprisingly creepy scenes that had me in love with this book. And now for the top 6 books in all the other genres. These books include magical realism, fantasy, science fiction, classics. So let's get started. The first book on this list is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is a sci-fi thriller that was super fast-paced and was mostly thriller, but touched on some amazing sci-fi elements that I really loved. Dark Matter was one of the most compulsively readable books of the year, and I remember a moment or two that really completely blew my mind, and I couldn't believe what I was reading, and it was a great time reading this book. The next favorite is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I really, really loved the Farseer trilogy when I read it this year. And it is one of my favorite fantasy series of all time now. So there's no way I could not put it on my list, because I'm really glad that I found this new series as a favorite and a new author that I have plenty more books to read from. The next book is The Count of Monte Cristo, which is a classic story of revenge, originally published in French by Alexandre Dumas, and this is my number one favorite classic at this point until I find a new one. Next is The Enchanted by Renee Denfeld. This is magical realism story taking place in a prison that is both sad and somehow feeling very magical. The characters are all very morally gray and very well developed, and I really enjoyed following their story through this prison. The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman is another standout favorite for the year. I read this towards the beginning of the year, and a very short classic story about a woman who is dealing with some troubles with her mental state and becomes obsessed with the yellow wallpaper in a room that she absolutely hates and somehow cannot stop looking at, and she starts to see things in the wallpaper design the longer that she's in this room. The last favorite book of 2020 is Adulthood Rights by Octavia Butler, which is book 2 in the Xenogenesis series. And this is a science fiction series that involves very strange aliens that need humans or other beings in order to reproduce, and the humans need these aliens to help restore the earth to a livable state. So those are all my favorite books of 2020, and I can't wait to see what my favorites will be in the year to come. If you like this video, you can hit like and subscribe, and I'll be back very soon with another book-related video. Thanks. Bye.